Apex a bit soon. Stay up. That's it. Out we go. In. Apex as well. Oh, we missed the apex there. Let's go out. Right out the cockpit. Latch out in fourth gear. Third gear. Fourth down. Nearly to 5 down. Well, welcome to another episode of repairs to this poor old Triumph 2500 Mark 1. Well, where do we stand? Well, last time, in the last episode, I was dealing with a problem related to the temperature of the engine. Now, I know from pointing the thermometer doohickey at everything that the engine isn't running hot, that it was a definite, some sort of gauge related issue. Anyway, eventually, after testing many gauges and voltage stabilizers and senders, I was getting nowhere. So I decided to just ignore it and live with it. I set up the best setup that gave me the better reading, which was a second-hand sender, a new voltage stabilizer, and the gauge that was in the dash. I've driven the car now for a couple of 100 kilometres, and it runs between 1/4 and 1/2 on the gauge, which is a touch hotter than it has traditionally run for the last 35 years, but it's a new engine. And is that gauge telling me the truth? I know from the thermal gadget that it's perhaps not. At any rate, it's been going very well, and all is well. The temperature does creep up if you go up a steep hill. If you get in traffic, the temperature will creep up to 1/2 on the gauge, and it's hard not to obsess at looking at that all the time and worrying about it, but when I point the gadget at it, it's at running temperature. So that's all good. The problem we're facing at the moment is there's oil coming out. The last drive I did on it, the overdrive stopped working, and I started to get that very familiar smell of gearbox oil. So there's a lot of gearbox oil under there. There's oil, in fact, everywhere. I can't really say exactly where it's coming out. Certainly I can eliminate a whole lot of things. But my best guess, and it appears to be coming out, the bolts that hold the overdrive on. Now when I put that back together, there was a couple of copper washers amongst them, and I took my best guess on which bolts are supposed to have those copper washers, and I think I must have got one of them wrong. Anyway, I'm basically going to replace all those with copper washers and put a bit of silicone on them and put them back in. The other possibility is coming out the speedo drive. Now I did silicone in, I put a new O-ring on it and silicone on the body of it, I suppose you'd call it, but I didn't silicone in the actual cable itself. So I might put some silicone around there just to be on the safe side. The other thing that was leaking is the power steering. Just from a superficial look, I can't really identify that, so I'm just going to try and tighten up all the various fittings in the hope that just one of them is loose enough that it's leaking a little bit. It's only a tiny leak. So let's get on with all that. Well, I've had to take the cross member off and speedo drive, drop the exhaust down in order to get to things. Now I've done one of the bolts with a copper washer and some silicone. Others just don't look like they're leaking, but I will be doing them possibly anyway. So let's get on with it. Alright, it's all back together. There's silicone around the speedo drive here, and there's silicone around bolts, nuts that are up in around the overdrive. So that's all siliconed up as well. And got copper washers on them. So all I got to do now is put some oil in the gearbox and give that silicone time to go off before I can give it a test drive. Now while I'm under here, I'll just sort of have a look at this exhaust and how bad it is. It will be getting a new exhaust in about a week. Now it'll be starting there where that extractor's end and come through here. Now there's no need for this great big bend that comes up over the cross member. There's plenty of room down here instead of it banging on the floor in the gearbox. This dodgy repair right here, just here, that's got to be done away with, and it won't have such a bend in it. It'll sort of just come along here, and then the rest of it will be much the same as it currently is. The rest of the exhaust will stay much the same as it is, but it'll be new. It comes down here and goes through that cross member there, and it'll probably have a flange somewhere around here maybe, so I can take that centre, the whole bit of exhaust out. I'm not sure about the back of it, what we'll do there. It'll probably end up much the same, maybe a flange on the other side of this cross member, and the piece that goes through the cross member will become a very permanent thing that you won't be able to get out without cutting. That would enable me to drop the muffler and the back part of the exhaust off as well. The other thing I'd like to do is put one of those sort of stainless steely looking wiggle joints in. I'm not sure where to put that though. I'll talk to the exhaust guy about that. Well, that's that done. All the nuts that I think might have had some oil leaks coming through from the back of the overdrive, now got copper washers on them and silicone as well, and I've also put some silicone around the speedo drive. So we'll let that go off overnight, and tomorrow I'll get this down on the ground and take it for a bit of a drive and see what happens. While it was up in the air, I went over a whole lot of nuts and bolts in the front end and cross members and what have you, just checking they were all tight, and the vast majority were, so all is good there. And so and I tightened up the hose clamps and the fittings on the power steering. None of them were particularly loose. I think one tightened up a little bit. We'll have to wait and see on that one. We might still have an oil leak there, but we'll drive it and see. Well, here I am out on a little road trip, if you want to call it that, putting some more Ks on this engine. I'm currently on what I would call the road to Wollombi, and I'm just going to head up here a little way, turn off at Kulnara, go down Bumble Hill, through Yarramalong. I'm ultimately heading to the tip. I've got a boot full of old car parts that are just rubbish, worn out rubbish, and it's steel, so I can just take it to the tip and they don't charge and get rid of it. It's really just an excuse to drive this car, and I am driving the scenic route that's taking me around the world. It should put about 100 Ks on this engine, give or take, just to get a few more Ks up on it. Now, of course, for those non-Australians, a tip is, in today's terminology, a waste recycling centre depot. Who knows what they call them these days. You know, when I worked, I remember I worked for the same organisation for 30 odd years, and every time you get a new CEO, they'd have this big meeting, you know, to tell you all the great things that is going to happen. Invariably that meant a new corporate logo, a new colour scheme and a new uniform. A bit of paint splashed around here and there. But I always remember they had this meeting and their CEO's up and he introduced himself and what his job was. And some wag sort of called out, again for you non-Australians, a wag is a larrikin, a bit of a stirrer, a comedian. This wag called out, the longer the job title, the less important the job. And always stuck in my mind. And that pretty well goes for the way everything has sort of been lengthened these days, where a tip used to be a tip, and now it's a waste disposal recycle depot or something. Anyway, that's where I'm heading, to get rid of some old steel and rubbish. Not, you know, steel rubbish. Old car parts, basically. And to put some Ks on this car. Now, it goes to get a new exhaust in a few days. By then it'll have its 500 Ks up, and so when it comes back from the exhaust repair or replacement, it will get an oil change. I'll retension the head, I'll recheck the tappets, and there's a clunk in the front end that I need to look at, and I think I know what it is. I think it's the bushes in what I would call the radius arm. It's the suspension arm that, if it was adjustable, would adjust the caster. It's not adjustable. So I'll replace those bushes. Unfortunately, it would have been 10 times easier to do with the engine out. The exhaust is in the way, the extractors, and I'm not even sure I'll be able to do it without pulling the extractors off. And that's a bit of a job. I didn't really want to do that. We'll give it a go. And so that's what will be happening. And so anyway, temperature is hanging in a very nice area, between 1.25 on the gauge. Car's running fine. There's no smell of gearbox oil, so hopefully I've fixed the gearbox oil leak. Hopefully the power steering leak is fixed. So all is good at the moment. I'm currently going down a hill called Bumble Hill. It goes from Kulnara down to Yarramalong, and it's one steep little hill. Now, in a standard TR7 coming down this hill, even driving extremely sedately with your foot off the brake as much as you can, when you get to the T-junction at the bottom of the hill, it'll have no brakes. Now, my TR7's got a conversion, a ventilated conversion, a 4-piston caliper, so you can come down here quite hard on the brakes and it won't worry it. Again, a standard dolly, again, would have no brakes at the bottom of this hill. And again, my dolly's not a standard dolly in the brake department, so... and this is a standard brakes on this car, but it won't have any trouble either. They're reasonable on this. So, it's a bit of a steep climb going, well, the climb going up, and it's hard on the brakes going down. Now years ago, and I mean years ago, I used to rally a Leyland Marina. I know. And I was in a rally. This is a special stage forest rally in the mountains behind Coffs Harbour, coming down into Nana Glen, and my old man was service crewing for me in Nana Glen. But anyway, we came down. It was about a 20 odd K stage, mostly downhill, just like this, but dirt tracks. Lots of hard braking, lots of tight bends, and they had a control point at the sort of base of quite a steep hill, and we pulled up there, and the smoke that was coming off the brakes and the smell, my poor navigator was on the verge of throwing up, and the smoke just billowed off these brakes, and the control official sort of said, I could see the brakes glowing red. And I thought, my goodness. Now that's an achievement. Red glowing brakes on a Leyland Marina. The Marina's brakes weren't that bad actually, but yeah. You can tell I'm getting old and living in the past. Well, that's it. I'm back after that trip. Done 94 kilometres. The car has run without any fault. I'm not aware of any problems. No smell of burning oil or anything like that. I got caught in a bit of traffic and the temperature rose a bit. The fans haven't turned on when I got back here. So all is good. So that's about the end of this episode, I think. Tune in, same duck time, same duck channel, for more mechanical mayhem on this poor old car, when I'll be doing the retensioning the head and the tappets and the changing the oil and putting the sump guard on. So, bye for now.